While the media mocks Donald Trump's renewed interest in acquiring Greenland as the ramblings of an unstable leader, Chinese mining companies are already conducting geological surveys along Greenland's southern coastline. Beijing has deployed icebreaker research vessels to map rare earth deposits that American satellites identified 3 years ago. This isn't a real estate fantasy. This is the opening move of the most consequential resource war of the 21st century. What we're witnessing is the collision of three unstoppable forces: the collapse of American rare earth independence, the militarization of Arctic shipping lanes, and the systematic economic penetration of Chinese state capital into Western dependencies. The acquisition of Greenland isn't Trump's ego project, it's the Pentagon's survival strategy. To understand why, American military planners view Greenland as a national security necessity rather than a territorial expansion, you have to follow the supply chains that keep American civilization functioning. Right now, as you watch this video, 87% of the rare earth elements in your phone, your car, and your military's most advanced weapons systems come from Chinese-controlled sources. Beijing doesn't just mine these materials. They control the entire processing infrastructure. Even when rare earths are mined in other countries, they are shipped to China for refinement, because no other nation has built the industrial capacity to challenge Chinese dominance. This monopoly represents the greatest strategic vulnerability in American economic history. China can collapse the U.S. defense industry overnight simply by restricting rare earth exports. They've done it before. In 2010, during a territorial dispute with Japan, Beijing cut off rare earth supplies and crashed Japanese high-tech manufacturing within weeks. The message was clear. Economic dependency equals political submission. Greenland changes everything. The U.S. Geological Survey's classified assessments, portions of which have leaked through congressional testimony, estimate that Greenland contains approximately 38.5 million tons of rare earth oxides. To put this in perspective, China's total proven reserves are estimated at 44 million tons. Greenland alone could break China's stranglehold on global supply chains. But these resources remain frozen under Danish bureaucracy and environmental regulations that make extraction nearly impossible under current political arrangements. The economic mathematics of acquisition are staggering when viewed through the lens of national security accounting. The Pentagon currently spends approximately $3.7 billion annually on rare earth imports, with 76% of that money flowing directly to Chinese state-owned enterprises. Over a 20-year horizon, the U.S. will transfer nearly $75 billion to Beijing just to maintain current defense production levels. This doesn't account for the expansion needed to counter China's military modernization or the premium costs during supply disruptions. Compare this to the estimated acquisition cost of Greenland. Intelligence community assessments suggest that a comprehensive buyout package, including debt assumption, infrastructure investment, and population relocation assistance, would cost between $1.2 trillion and $1.80 trillion spread over 15 years. This sounds enormous until you realize that the F-35 fighter program alone has cost $1.7 trillion. The acquisition of Greenland would pay for itself within 2 decades through resource extraction revenues and supply chain independence. But the Chinese understand this calculus as well, which explains their aggressive Arctic strategy over the past 5 years. Beijing's Polar Silk Road initiative isn't about shipping lanes or climate research. It's about resource access and strategic Chinese state-owned enterprises have attempted to purchase mining rights, port facilities, and airport construction contracts throughout the Arctic region. When direct acquisition fails, they deploy the debt trap model that has proven so effective in Africa and Southeast Asia. The attempted purchase of Greenland's abandoned naval bases by Chinese firms in 2016 and 2018 represented probe operations testing Western response times and Danish resolve. When these attempts were blocked by U.S. pressure, Chinese strategy shifted to indirect penetration. State-owned China Communications Construction Company began offering to finance airport upgrades in 3 Greenlandic cities. The contracts included 99-year operational leases that would effectively give Beijing control over Arctic air traffic. This is the same model China used to capture Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka and Gwadar Port in Pakistan. offer generous financing for infrastructure projects that the recipient nation cannot afford. Structure the debt terms to ensure eventual default. Convert debt obligations into long-term territorial control. Applied to Greenland, this strategy would give China permanent strategic positions within 500 miles of the American mainland. Danish intelligence services, resource-constrained and politically naive, have proven incapable of detecting or deterring Chinese economic infiltration. Copenhagen's annual intelligence budget is approximately $340 million, less than the cost of a single Chinese mining survey operation. Denmark lacks the technological capabilities to monitor Chinese activities in Greenland's vast interior, or to verify that research stations are not dual-use military facilities. The Danish government's $611 million annual subsidy to Greenland creates a permanent vulnerability to Chinese economic warfare. Beijing can simply offer $1.2 billion in direct aid, plus infrastructure investment to purchase Greenlandic political loyalty. For a population of 56,000 people, this represents approximately $21,000 per capita in additional annual income. No democratic political system could resist such an economic incentive, especially when the current Danish arrangement treats Greenland as a dependent territory rather than an equal partner, American. Intelligence assessments indicate that Chinese operatives have already established contact with Greenlandic independence activists. The strategy mirrors successful Chinese operations in the Pacific, where Beijing supported independence movements in strategic island nations and then immediately offered security partnerships to newly independent governments. Greenlandic independence, if achieved without American involvement, would create a power vacuum that China is positioned to fill within months. The military dimensions of this competition have escalated dramatically since 2019. Russia has constructed 12 new Arctic military installations and deployed S-4 missile systems that can engage aircraft flying over Greenlandic airspace. Chinese research icebreakers, equipped with military-grade sonar and communications equipment, conduct regular surveys of potential submarine routes between Greenland and North America. These activities represent systematic intelligence gathering. For future military operations, American response capabilities remain constrained by political sensitivities within NATO. Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty theoretically protects Danish sovereignty over Greenland, creating a legal contradiction if the U.S. pursues unilateral action. However, Pentagon legal reviews have identified potential precedents for intervention based on Danish failure to meet collective defense obligations. If Denmark cannot prevent hostile penetration of Arctic territory critical to North American security, the U.S. maintains the right to assume defensive responsibilities. Economic absorption model under consideration involves 3 parallel tracks designed to minimize diplomatic fallout while ensuring strategic objectives. Track 1 focuses on direct engagement with Greenlandic political leaders, bypassing Danish authority through cultural and educational exchanges that demonstrate American commitment to Greenlandic self-determination. Track 2 involves systematic economic pressure on Denmark, increasing the cost of maintaining Arctic sovereignty through enhanced security requirements and environmental compliance standards. Track 3 prepares legal frameworks for emergency intervention in the event of Chinese or Russian military activities in Greenland territory. Financial modeling conducted by the Treasury Department suggests that full integration of Greenland into the U.S. customs and monetary union would generate approximately $340 billion in economic activity over the first decade through resource extraction, military construction, and civilian infrastructure development. Greenlandic per capita income would increase from the current $33,000 to an estimated $78,000 within 5 years of integration. This economic transformation would create irreversible political momentum toward American alignment. The strategic shipping dimension adds urgency to acquisition time. Climate change has reduced Arctic ice coverage by 35% since 2007, opening previously inaccessible shipping routes that could reduce transport costs between Asia and Europe by 22%. Control over Greenlandic ports and territorial waters provides the United States with choke point authority over $1.3 trillion in annual trade flows. This represents leverage over both Chinese exports and European imports. that would fundamentally alter global trade relationships. Chinese recognition of this vulnerability explains their willingness to risk diplomatic confrontation over Arctic access. Beijing's military modernization depends on maintaining export revenues to finance weapons procurement and technology development. Disruption of Chinese shipping routes would force Beijing to choose between aggressive military action and economic accommodation with American demands. Russian calculations follow similar logic, but with greater urgency due to geographic proximity. Moscow views American control over Greenland as strategic encirclement that would compromise Russia's Northern Fleet operations and Arctic resource development plans. Russian intelligence services have increased activities in Greenland substantially, with at least 17 documented penetration attempts of scientific research facilities since 2021. The window for peaceful acquisition is narrowing rapidly due to accelerating great power competition and the approaching Greenlandic independence referendum scheduled for 2027. Current polling shows 43% support for independence from Denmark, with support concentrated among younger voters who view American partnership as more beneficial than European dependency. Chinese economic offers have not yet peaked, suggesting that Beijing views the 2027 timeline as critical for establishing irreversible influence. Congressional budget authorization for Arctic acquisition has increased by 340% over the past 18 months, indicating administrative preparation for multiple scenarios, including negotiated purchase, economic absorption, and emergency intervention. The Defense Department has requested $47 billion for Arctic infrastructure over the next 5 years, with the majority designated for facilities that would support civilian population, integration, and resource extraction. Operations. Opposition research conducted by State Department analysts suggests that European resistance to American acquisition would remain largely symbolic due to European dependence on American military protection against Russian aggression. Germany and France lack independent capabilities to project power in the Arctic, while Nordic countries depend on American security guarantees for their own territorial integrity. European protests would focus on legal frameworks rather than practical resistance. The technological dimensions of this competition extend beyond rare earth mining to include communications, infrastructure, and satellite operations. Greenland's geographic position provides optimal sites for space-based defense systems and Arctic surveillance networks. Chinese control over any significant portion of Greenlandic territory would compromise American missile defense capabilities and create permanent intelligence vulnerabilities. Economic impact assessments indicate that successful acquisition would increase American GDP by approximately 0.7% over the first decade. Through direct resource extraction and indirect economic effects, this growth would be concentrated in defense industries, technology, manufacturing, and Arctic shipping services, sectors critical to maintaining American technological leadership against Chinese competition. The human costs of delayed action must be weighed against the risks of immediate intervention. If Chinese economic penetration reaches critical mass, the eventual conflict over Arctic resources would involve military action in populated areas rather than negotiated economic transition. Current Greenlandic leadership has indicated willingness to consider American partnership if presented as voluntary association rather than territorial absorption. Intelligence. Community consensus projects that American acquisition of Greenland within the next 3 years would prevent Chinese Arctic penetration, secure critical resource supplies, and maintain American strategic dominance in the Northern Hemisphere for the remainder of the 21st century. Failure to act within this window would likely result in Chinese-controlled Arctic territory within 500 miles of the American mainland and permanent compromise of North American defense systems. The acquisition of Greenland represents the last opportunity to prevent Chinese strategic encirclement of North America through Arctic penetration. This isn't about territorial expansion or presidential ego. This is about preventing the United States from becoming economically and subordinate to Chinese strategic planning through resource dependency and geographic vulnerability. The decision timeline has compressed 2 months, rather than years, due to accelerating Chinese activities and approaching political transitions in both Greenland and Denmark. American strategic planners understand that this opportunity will not recur. Either the United States acts now to secure Arctic dominance, or it accepts permanent strategic disadvantage. In the emerging great power competition with China, the mathematics are clear. The strategic implications are undeniable. The window is closing. Greenland is not a choice. It's a necessity.